Hey, what's up guys? I hope you're having an amazing 2018 so far. This video is on input lag. How important is it? Is it that important that you should choose one manufacturer over the other? Is it that kind of number that you should be focused on? So quickly guys, that if you don't know what input lag is, it's very, very simple, as input lag is very simply the amount of time it takes from the gamepad to show up on screen. Same with movement. It's really the input from your controller to what you see on screen. If that number is too high, it'll put you at a disadvantage in terms of multiplayer games, things of that nature. It also make the control seem very floaty, almost like you're steering a very slow boat. So input lag is not latency, it's not response time. And to me, response time is a more important metric, but we'll get back to that later. So the question I get more than any other on the channel in regards to especially the Sony 900E is its input lag. More than its picture quality, more than its HDR performance, more than what size display should I get, it's always about input lag. Mostly, if you look at my videos, a lot of them are games, so it's natural that that's going to be the question. So before I get into input lag, what I want to get into is the reviews for displays now are so detailed, especially from ones like artthings.com. I mean, they don't play around. They have numbers. They break down everything to the millisecond, gradation. I mean, they go nuts. And I appreciate that. The problem with that is we get stuck on some numbers. We get stuck on peak brightness. We get stuck on input lag. We can't see anything else. Eventually, you won't hear anything else. So, a perfect example is peak brightness. People look for the highest peak brightness, they go right for that, and don't even think about contrast ratio or picture quality. And right away they'll discount OLED simply because the peak brightness on another TV blows it away. Not thinking about the contrast ratio or that the OLED may look as bright due to perceived contrast. But before I get off on that, let's just go back to input lag. Same kind of thing. Some people have asked me about TCL. They've asked me about, the Vizio M series, P series. They have a very low input lag. And when I respond to them about picture quality, right away it's dismissed about input lag. They're very competitive gamers. They play, Fortnite. They play PUBG, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and they're very worried about their KD. It sounds kind of silly, but guys, I was the same way. I purchased the Vizio P series in 2016, 17.1 millisecond input lag. It had great reviews, but I was mostly focused on input lag. Sounds ridiculous, but hey, I'm a gamer. I'm competitive. I enjoy gaming more than I do movies, so I bought that display, and that was the metric I focused on. What I didn't focus on, and what they didn't really disclose until they updated the reviews later, and guys, be mindful, when you read a review, they'll go back and update those if something has changed. One thing that changed on that Vizio P series, guys, is that the Vizio had HDMI 5 was their fastest input, meaning it had the fastest input lag. What it also didn't have was HDR. So here I was with a brand new TV, an Xbox One S, and my HDMI input didn't support HDR. So I switched to the other inputs, not realizing that HDR also tripled the input lag. And also found that outside of game mode and outside of HDMI 5, it was basically unplayable. And that's kind of a problem. So, I also didn't love the picture quality, guys. So if you can get where I'm going, is I went with the input lag first, instead of following picture quality and any of the others. So then I went to the Samsung KS9000, 19 millisecond input lag. And what I didn't do in my research there was I didn't realize that when I chose PC settings or went to the chroma subspace, it actually locked me out of the other picture menus and left me with dynamic. I couldn't really, which doesn't let you really change the picture quality much at all. So we have to do our research and more than just that number. So when it came time for the Sony 900E, I was actually a snob. I'd already been to flagship displays, and that input lag was 32 milliseconds, and I just wouldn't have it. So after much debate, I went with the 940E, then down to the 900E, and I couldn't be happier. And what I'm here to tell you is that I did not notice one bit of difference between the input lag of the Sony 900E and the Vizio P series. I noticed no difference, even though one was 17 milliseconds and the other was actually 31 milliseconds. And believe me, guys, I looked for it. When I would play, I watched my scores. I wanted to see if I was feeling a big difference, and I didn't notice any difference. So you're talking about a 15 millisecond difference, 17 milliseconds, 19 milliseconds to 30 milliseconds should be felt if we go by what people say. Now, guys, I'm also discounting 20-inch monitors that have 0 milliseconds, Acer, BenQ, all these great monitors. Let's be realistic, guys. Those monitors they're great for what they do. They're also not only smaller, they don't have HDR, they have different contrast ratios, so we're just sticking with, I'm not taking anything away from those, we're just sticking with displays here. So those of you that want to comment about your monitors, I'm just not interested in that conversation. This is really for people looking to buy a display. So back to the input lag, guys, I cannot feel a difference at all. What is important, though, is that I find the Sony 900E playable outside of game mode. And with the Samsung and with the Vizio, I do not find it playable at all. Now, even though the input lag does go up outside of game mode, it doesn't feel like night and day to me. I wouldn't play multiplayer on it, but it's fine for cinematic games, things of that nature. And if you want to add motion, that's up to you. But back to multiplayer, is it noticeable? I will tell you, it is not noticeable, guys. I mean, this doesn't really show you much, but to me, it's just not noticeable. I find it to be just as responsive. I find it to be just as quick. And that is what's really important to me. Not to mention, I found the picture quality to be, I wouldn't say better than, say, the KS9000. What I liked about it was the Sony, even though it has its own game mode and grays out some of the options, it does give you a lot more options to choose from. Where I found with the Samsung that it grayed out the options and I only had a few to choose from. So I find the picture to be very customizable. But people wouldn't touch OLED for the longest time because it had the highest input lag. I think at the time it was probably in its mid-30s or 40 milliseconds, maybe as high as 60 milliseconds. Now, guys, you get into the 40s and the 60 milliseconds, and yes, you can feel it to be a little bit sluggish, but I'm telling you, my honest opinion, between the 17 milliseconds and the 32 milliseconds, I notice absolutely no difference. What's also very important, guys, when you're choosing input lag, make sure the 1080p input lag at 60, the 4K at 60 is good. Also make sure that your input lags with HDR are also low. Before you start choosing a display like I did with the Vizio, here I am chasing 17 milliseconds, having no idea that with HDR, that number triples. Now, playing a game like Battlefield 1, which has HDR, or you're looking at Call of Duty right now, also has HDR, it would be a damn shame to shut off HDR just so I can have a faster input lag. So back to what I was saying is that, just kind of make sure that the input lag is good on all different resolutions. For instance, the input lag on the Sony 930E at 1080p at 60 is 40 milliseconds. Now that won't matter to many of you because you're playing through PS4 Pros and Xbox One X. So even if the game is 1080p, as long as it's outputting 4K, you'll still have the low 20 milliseconds. But it's something to think about. When you get into the Sony 900E, yes, its input lag is probably higher than its siblings, but it stays at that input lag at just about every different. So right now we have 1080p at 60, 32 milliseconds. 1080p with HDR, 34 milliseconds. 4K at 60, 34 milliseconds. 4K with HDR, 34 milliseconds. So the input lag is 32 to 34, but it doesn't vary much. What's even amazing, if you're into 120 frames per second gaming, at 120 hertz, the Sony 900E is 16.9 milliseconds. So for you PC gamers out there that want the lowest input lag, at 1080p at 120 FPS, 16.9 milliseconds. But what's important is it remains pretty consistent through all the different options. Now again, outside of game mode, it does get high. But latency is less important when we're talking about single player campaigns. So input lag, guys, just to finish the video up, I know it's been a little all over the place. If you're looking at your new displays, you're not purchasing the Sony 900E, and you're looking at other input lags, just keep those things in mind. You want it to be very even keeled over all of the resolutions. And HDR is going to be pretty much in every multiplayer game coming out, so it's very important to pick one that has a suitable input lag at HDR. I will tell you again from my experience, between a 17 millisecond Vizio and a 32, 34 millisecond Sony 900E, I notice absolutely no difference. The big difference, guys, which is the most important, is the picture quality is the big difference, for me anyway. So TCL, all those brands are great, but I want you to really consider not only input lag, but picture quality with input lag, then make your choice. I'm always here to answer any questions, but this is a question I was getting a lot, so I want to do a separate video on it. So don't be afraid of the input lag number, guys. Anything under, I would say, mid-30s is fine. You get into the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and that's pretty damn high. But I play a lot of multiplayer games, guys, primarily Battlefield 1, and I've noticed no drop in my numbers and just really enjoyed the experience. So that is it. Happy 2018, guys. Thank you as always. Thank you for the amazing comments, the questions. You can find me on Instagram at WhisperStatus74. I look forward to talking to each and every one of you. I hope you have an amazing 2018, and I will talk to you guys soon.